Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is a Monday. It's a Monday and it is February 3rd, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. If you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so by giving us a call at 563. Nope, that's on autopilot. By emailing us, you can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org, whyagain.org. And if we get a comment or a question, testimonial from you, we will address it on the internet show as time allows, then send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it so much easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that's just a lot easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So please let us know. Comments, questions, is it most useful for you if we just keep going with the Thich Nhat Hanh reading of the book Being Peace, or is there another endeavor we could engage in that might be of use to you? We're offering people in the support groups on Tuesdays and Thursdays the option to do a worksheet on a regular basis, and that's also a possibility every time we have an internet show. If there's time available, we'd be happy to step you through the process of at least outlining, if not actually working through, a reality management worksheet, which is the primary tool in this work to help me understand how I'm creating the tightness or tension, or what most would describe as a negative emotional state, and um, and allow us to have an entirely different, more relaxed, more loving, more compassionate experience of life. That's what's possible if I'm willing to take 100% responsibility for any emotional state that arises and then apply the Reality Management Worksheet to that process and unravel my denial. Denial in this sense being any thought that anyone or anything outside of me is responsible for creating or maintaining my experience, my emotions in the moment. So, unless somebody calls in, if you want to call in, you need to download the Needle app. It's Nedl from your app store. And if you're listening live at live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, we're glad you're here. And yet, if you have an intention to communicate with us directly, either in typing in a comment or speaking directly through the phone, you need to download the Needle app and sign in. One of the benefits of that is that if you download the app and sign in and favorite this show, then every time someone goes live, your phone will get a notification, and you can open the app and listen in and or participate by commenting or calling. So since no one has a hand up and the people that are listening are quite familiar with my recommendation that you call or comment, even if I seem to be in the middle of reading something or in what some people would call a monologue, please feel free to interrupt, because it's an addition rather than an interruption whenever that happens. Back to Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Being Peace, where we left off was with the new section, the new lesson or chapter 6, titled Interbeing. And he says, I believe that the encounter between Buddhism and the West will bring about something very exciting and very important. There are important values in Western society, such as the scientific way of looking at things, and the spirit of free inquiry and of democracy. If there is an encounter between Buddhism and these values, humankind will have something very new and very exciting. Let us look at some examples. He writes, printing was invented in China, and movable metal type was invented in Korea. However, when the West began printing, it became a very important means for communication. Gunpowder was discovered by the Chinese, but when it came to be manufactured by Westerners, it changed the face of the earth. And tea was invented in Asia. When brought to the West, it has become tea bags. When combined with the Western way of doing things, the Buddhist principle of seeing and acting non-dualistically will totally change our way of life. The role of American Buddhists in bringing Buddhism into the encounter with the Western civilization is very important for all of us. Buddhism is not one. The teaching of Buddhism is many. When Buddhism enters one country, that country always acquires a new form of Buddhism. The first time I visited Buddhist communities in the United States, I asked a friend, please show me your Buddha, your American Buddha. The question surprised my friend because he thought that the Buddha was universal. In fact, the Chinese have a Chinese Buddha, Tibetans have a Tibetan Buddha, and also the teaching is different. The teaching of Buddhism in this country is different from other countries. Buddhism, in order to be Buddhism, must be suitable appropriate to the psychology and the culture of the society it serves. My question was a very simple question. Where is your bodhisattva? Show me an American bodhisattva. My friend was not capable of doing that. Show me an American monk, an American nun, or an American Buddhist center. All these things are not apparent yet. I think we can learn from other Buddhist traditions, but you have to create your own Buddhism. I believe that out of deep practice, you will have your own Buddhism very soon. He goes on, I would like to present to you a form of Buddhism that may be accepted here in the West. In the past 20 years, we've been experimenting with this form of Buddhism, and it seems that it may be suitable for our modern society. It is called the Tip Hien Order, the Order of Interbeing. The Tip Hien Order was founded in Vietnam during the war. It derives from the Zen school of Lin Chi and is the 42nd generation of this school. It is a form of engaged Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism is Buddhism in daily life, in society, and not just in a retreat center. Tiep and Hien are Vietnam words of Chinese origin. I would like to explain the meaning of these words because understanding them helps in understanding the spirit of this order. Tiep means to be in touch. The notion of engaged Buddhism appears in the word tiep. First of all, to be in touch with oneself. In modern society, most of us don't want to be in touch with ourselves. We want to be in touch with other things like religion, sports, politics, a book. We want to forget ourselves. Anytime we have leisure, we want to invite something else to enter us, opening ourselves to the television and telling the television to come and colonize us. So first of all, the phrase in touch means in touch with oneself in order to find out the source of wisdom, understanding, and compassion in each of us. Being in touch with oneself is the meaning of meditation, to be aware of what is going on in your body, in your feelings, in your mind. This is the first meaning of Tiep. Tiep also means to be in touch with Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the enlightened people in whom full understanding and compassion are tangible and effective. Being in touch with oneself means being in touch with this source of wisdom and compassion. You know that children understand that the Buddha is in themselves. One young boy claimed to be a Buddha on the first day of the retreat in Ojai, California. I told him that this is partly true, because sometimes he is Buddha, but sometimes he is not. It depends on the degree of his being awake. The second part of the Tiep is to continue, to make something more long-lasting. It means that the career of understanding and compassion started by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas should be continued. This is possible only if we get in touch with our true self, which is like digging deep into the soil until we reach a hidden source of fresh water. And then the well is filled. When we are in touch with our true mind, the source of understanding and compassion will spring out. This is the basis of everything. Being in touch with our true mind is necessary for the continuation of the career started by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The second word of Tiep Hien is Hien. It means the present time. We have to be in the present time because only the present is real. Only in the present moment can we be alive. We do not practice for the sake of the future, to, to be reborn in a paradise, but we practice to be at peace. We practice to be peace, to be compassion, to be joy right now. Hien also means to make real, to manifest, realization. Love and understanding are not only concepts and words. They must be real things, realized in oneself and in society. That is the meaning of the word hien. It is difficult to find English or French words which convey the same meaning as tiep hien. There is a term from the Avatamsaka Sutra that's titled interbeing. And that term conveys the spirit, so we have translated tiep hien as the word interbeing. In the sutra, it is a compound term which means mutual and to be. Interbeing is a new word in English, and I hope it will be accepted. We have talked about the many in the one, and the one containing the many. In one sheet of paper, we see everything else: the cloud, the forest, the logger. I am, therefore you are. You are, therefore I am. That is the meaning of the word interbeing. We are. In the order of interbeing, there are two communities. The core community consists of the lay and monastic men and women who have taken the vow to observe the 14 mindfulness trainings of the order. Before being ordained as a brother or a sister of the order of interbeing, one should practice at least 1 year in this way. Upon ordination, the person has to organize a community around himself or herself in order to continue the practice. The community is called the extended community. This means all those who practice exactly the same way, but have not taken the vow, have not been ordained into the core community. The lay people who are ordained into the core community do not have any special sign at all. They don't shave their heads, they don't have a special robe, except sometimes they wear a brown jacket. What makes them different is that they observe a number of rules, one of which is to practice at least 60 days of retreat, days of mindfulness, each year, whether consecutively or divided into several periods. If they practice every Sunday, for instance, they will have 52 already. The people in the extended community can do that or more, even if they don't want to be ordained. In the core community, people can choose to observe celibacy or lead a family life. At least once every 2 weeks, members and friends come together and recite the 14 mindfulness trainings. They begin with the 3 refuges and the 2 promises for children. These 2 promises envelop all the mindfulness trainings of the adults. The first promise is, quote, I vow to develop my compassion in order to love and protect the life of people, animals, plants, and minerals, close quotes. The second promise is, quote, I vow to develop understanding in order to be able to love and to live in harmony with people, animals, plants, and minerals, close quotes. So the 2 promises are compassion or love and understanding. They are the essence of the Buddha's teachings. After the children recite these 3 refuges and 2 promises, they go outside and play, and the adults recite their 14 mindfulness trainings. Until recently, I have used the term precepts instead of mindfulness trainings. But many Western minds and friends told me that the word precepts evokes in them a strong feeling of good and evil, and that if they break a precept, they feel they have completely failed. Precepts are different from commandments. They are the insights born of directly observing suffering and the causes of suffering. They are the most concrete expression of the practice of mindfulness. That is why it is appropriate and helpful to describe them as mindfulness trainings. Precepts usually begin with admonitions concerning the body, such as, quote, not to kill, close quotes. The mindfulness trainings of the order of interbeing are the opposite. The ones concerning the mind come first. According to the teachings of the Buddha, the mind is the root of everything else. These, then, are the mindfulness trainings of the order of interbeing. The first mindfulness training, aware of the suffering created by fanaticism and intolerance, we are determined not to be idolatrous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even Buddhist ones. Buddhist teachings are guiding means to help us learn to look deeply and to develop our understanding and compassion. They are not doctrines to fight, kill, or die for. Now, as I read that and I flashed on within the past couple of years, there have been several people who want to debate with me about whether or not Buddhism is a religion or something else. And when I read this last paragraph, that's how I've always been introduced to Buddhism. It's not a religion. It doesn't clash with any other religion. So I'm going to read that last paragraph again because religions to me have doctrines, ideologies, idols that they want their adherents to be willing to fight, kill, and die for. And this paragraph from the beginning, the first mindfulness training says that we are aware of the suffering created by fanaticism and intolerance, and we are determined not to be idolatrous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even one labeled as a Buddhist doctrine or theory or ideology. It goes on and says, Buddhist teachings are guiding means to help us learn to look deeply and to develop our understanding and compassion. They are not doctrines to fight, kill, or die for. I think that would be enough to just read and meditate on for the next half hour. This is why I present books like this, because again, we're talking about learning to live in direct observation, not learning to live from a doctrine or a teaching, but live the teaching, not from the teaching. Be in the middle of it. Let it develop in you. Let it grow in you and be a direct response to you engaging with life as your primary user interface with life with your wide open heart, rather than your intellect and your judgments and your perceptions. So Thich Nhat Hanh goes on and says, this mindfulness training is the roar of the lion. Its spirit is characteristic of Buddhism. It is often said that the Buddha's teaching is only a raft to help you cross the river. It's a finger pointing to the moon. Don't mistake the finger for the moon. The raft is not the shore. If we cling to the raft, If we cling to the finger, we miss everything. We cannot, in the name of the finger or the raft, kill each other. Human life is more precious than any ideology or doctrine. The order of interbeing was born in Vietnam during the war, which was a conflict between two world ideologies. In the name of ideologies and doctrines, people kill people, and they are killed by people. If you have a gun, you can shoot 1, 2, 3, 5 people. But if you have an ideology and stick to it, thinking it is the absolute truth, you can kill millions. This mindfulness training includes the admonition not to kill in its deepest sense. Humankind suffers very much from attachment to views. If you don't follow this teaching, I will cut your head off. In the name of truth, we will kill each other. The world is stuck in that situation. There are people who still think that Marxism is the highest product of the human mind and that nothing can compare with it. Others think it is crazy and we have to destroy those people. We are caught in this situation. One of the most basic teachings of the Buddha is that life is precious. Peace can only be achieved when we are free from fanaticism. The more you participate and practice this mindfulness training, the deeper you will go into reality and into understanding the teaching of the Buddha. So, again, a quick reminder, we have plenty of time for comments or questions. If you're using the app, it's at live.needle.com on Mindshifters Radio if you're listening live on the internet. And if you want to speak to us directly or drop a comment, you need to download the Needle app, N-E-D-L, AI for Live Radio Tuner. And we're greatly appreciative whenever anybody does that, even as we're heading into the second mindfulness training. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, aware of the suffering created by attachment to views and wrong perceptions, we are determined to avoid being narrow-minded and bound to present views. We shall learn and practice non-attachment from views in order to be open to others' insights and experiences. We are aware that the knowledge we presently possess is not changeless. It is not absolute truth. Truth is found in life, and we will observe life within and around us in every moment, ready to learn throughout our lives. This mindfulness training arises from the first one. Remember the young father who refused to open the door to his own son, thinking that the boy was already dead. The Buddha said, if you cling to something as absolute truth and are caught in it, when truth comes in person and knocks on your door, you will refuse to let it in. A scientist with an open mind who can question the present knowledge of science will have more of a chance of discovering a higher truth. A Buddhist in her quest for higher understanding also has to question her present views concerning reality. The technique of understanding is to overcome views and knowledge, overcome beliefs, overcome dogmas. The way of non-attachment from views is the basic teaching of Buddhism concerning understanding. And as a sidebar, this is what makes this so difficult for the Western mind. The Western mind has been trained to get it right, to know what it's talking about, to have the right answer, to avoid a wrong answer, to be able to recite it, to be able to fight for it. And anything I can recite is old dead thought, as Krishnamurti would talk about it. Anything I can recite is a thought from the past. And what we're being asked to do in all these different spiritual traditions that I'm blending into the Mind Shifters Radio and the support groups is learn to live observing wide open in the question. And one of the best questions I can ask in any moment is to be taught by life. Teach me. Or I can ask the question, what's mine to do here? How can I be a blessing to myself and others in this moment? And if I'm living in that questioning state and interacting with life from that question, and I'm willing to be taught by the truth of life in the moment, my success is assured. Not success that can be defined in any particular way, but success in terms of being awake and aware in the moment. So then here's the third mindfulness training from Thich Nhat Hanh. Aware of the suffering brought about when we impose our views on others, we are committed not to force others, even our children, by any means whatsoever. Any means such as authority, threat, money, propaganda, or indoctrination. We refuse to use any of these to pressure people, even our children, to adopt our views. We will respect the right of others to be different and to choose what they want to believe and how to decide. We will, however, help others renounce fanaticism and narrowness through compassionate dialogue. This also springs from the first mindfulness training. It is the spirit of free inquiry. I think Westerners can accept this because you understand it. If you can find a way to organize it globally, it will be a happy event for the world. And I have a different view about his assessment here that this would be easy for Westerners because I, having been raised in the Western mind, I have some insight that Thich Nhat Hanh doesn't, which is that it's really hard for us to put down the dogma, the belief, the principle, the recitation, the fight to be right. And that's why Michael Ryce has it in every worksheet, at least several times, I believe, that it says, I cancel my need to be right. I cancel the goal I have for myself or anybody else to change. That's a challenge. It's such a challenge, it's an important challenge that it's actually written into every reality management worksheet process. And I've got it repeated numerous times in the thing I call the forgiveness pattern. Okay, since we have callers listening, but no one with a hand up or a comment, I will move on. The fourth mindfulness training reads, aware that looking deeply at the nature of suffering can help us develop compassion and find ways out of suffering, we are determined not to avoid or close our eyes before suffering. We are committed to finding ways, including personal contact, images, and sounds, to be with those who suffer so we can understand their situation deeply and help them transform their suffering into compassion, peace, and joy. The first Dharma talk given by the Buddha was on the Four Noble Truths. The first truth is the existence of suffering. Contact with and awareness of suffering is needed. If we don't encounter pain, ills, we won't look for the cause of pain and ills to find it a remedy or find a way out of that situation. America is somehow a closed society. Americans are not very aware of what is going on outside of America. Life here is so busy that even if you watch television and read the newspaper and the images from the outside flash by, there is no real contact. I hope you will find some way to nourish the awareness of the existence of suffering in the world. Of course, inside America there is also suffering, and it is important to stay in touch with that. However, much of the suffering in the West is unnecessary and can vanish when we see the real suffering of other people. Sometimes we suffer because of some psychological fact. We cannot get out of ourself, and so we suffer. If we get in touch with the suffering in the world and are moved by that suffering, then we may come forward to help the people who are suffering, and our own suffering may just vanish. As I read that, I remember a time I was listening to Guy Finley, and he had he was in the middle of a long talk. It was so intense that you could tell he was getting emotionally um, touched and connected. And he said, I rarely do this, but I'll present a life situation that I had that demonstrates this very thing. What's the very thing? If we get in touch with the suffering in the world without avoiding it, if we let it touch us, we may just come forward to help others, and in that process of stepping forward to help others, our own suffering may just vanish. So the story that Guy Finley told was that he'd had some surgeries on his throat. And the first one didn't take, if I remember correctly, it was after his third surgery, because the first two didn't quite take. And he was just at at the end of his limit for the pain and the discomfort and the fear about ever being able to talk again, etc. And he remembers being in the hospital, just completely absorbed in his suffering, when another patient was brought into the room. And this was a woman and her husband, and the woman had had surgery. Clearly, some kind of cancer had necessitated them removing, I think he said most of one of her sides of her jaw. And it was just intense beyond words. And as he watched them interact, and he was in his own place of, before they came in the room, he was so absorbed in his worry and his pain and his suffering and his, oh my God, this is the third surgery and will this ever end? And what happened when they came in the room was that all of that shifted. And even though he could barely speak, he felt compelled to get out of bed, cross the room, and connect with these people and just give them the message, it's going to be okay. And he says he has no idea where that message came from. He didn't even have a sense that he was going to be okay before they came in the room. But this living in this open space, able to see and acknowledge suffering, especially yours and others at the same time. And what Guy Finley was telling in that story seems to me to fit, you know, exactly what Thich Nhat Hanh is writing about here when he says we cannot get out of ourselves, and so we suffer when we can't get out of ourselves and thinking about ourselves and obsessing about us. Yet if we get in touch with the suffering in the world, if we let ourselves be moved by that suffering, if we let ourselves come forward to help others who are suffering, our own suffering may just vanish. And that's exactly the outcome in the story from Guy Finley. He could have just laid there in his bed and basically ignored these other people. Or he could have laid there and just said, well, I'm glad I'm not them, but boy, this sure still sucks for me. But he let the truth of life in that moment into his heart. He felt their suffering and he let himself respond in a way that was in that moment nothing he thought of. It just, he found himself getting out of the bed that he, minutes before felt like he couldn't even get out of his own bed. And he'd been told, don't leave the bed, don't move around too much. And yet he let the truth of the situation act on him and he responded, and it lifted him out of his suffering as he did something to extend an offer of compassion to somebody else who was clearly suffering. So the idea is that we're going to be, if we're going to be doing this type of Buddhism that he's recommending, that Tiep Hien, which means being here now in the present moment, fully awake and aware. We have to acknowledge suffering, our own and others, and if we let the truth of that act on us, we might just find our own suffering diminishes or vanishes. We had a question typed in the comments from Audrey. She asks, what are your thoughts on AI? My thoughts on AI are very, very limited. I'm not an expert in the field. Occasionally I will listen to a video or read an article from someone on this. And there are two camps, there are two schools. One says, hey, there's nothing to worry about. AI is nowhere near close to achieving consciousness or being able to turn on humans, etc. And another camp says, we got a real problem and we keep acknowledging there's a problem and we keep starting up companies that are based solely on promoting safety for humanity in limiting what's going to happen with AI. And they talk about how several generations of those companies have already been established, and yet after a while they get so big that somebody comes and buys them and commercializes it, and then their focus is no longer on the safety, but their focus is on expanding the capacity of AI and the abilities of AI. So that's all I can tell you, is that in listening to the best experts I can find on it, which I occasionally do, I haven't made it a primary study, that there's both camps. And so Audrey says, at 83 years old, with this upcoming digital age, I feel like I am in the lost generation. Perseverance is a strong point, but I'm being challenged. She says, I learned how to navigate and soon the fields are changed again. Why is this happening again? I heard that possibly chips will be put in newborns in their brains in 2030, per Greg Braden's book. And I don't know what to tell you about that, Audrey, except that if I read something like that, my mind says, oh, I think Audrey's generating fear. And in this teaching, we really want to support people in waking up to any time they're generating fear and recognizing what is the mechanism they're using to generate that fear so they can choose from a conscious position whether they want to continue doing that. And Audrey says, no fear, knowledge seeking. Well, in, if you're seeking for knowledge on AI, I am not a good source for that. And I would offer that the Mind Shifters radio show isn't a real good source for it. It might be a good source for support in dismantling any negative thoughts you have about it, which might, if you pour enough mind energy into it, lead to a negative emotional state. And I have no idea what's going to happen by 2030. I have an idea just from watching how it's gone that technology continues to change faster than I can keep up with it. And at this stage in my focus of my life, I'm no longer interested in keeping up with it because it would take too much of my brain power, it would take too much of my energy, and my energy has been, you know, I'm I'm content to use my energy and my abilities in different ways other than trying to keep up with the technology. And Julia writes from the quoting from the Way of Mastery where it says, the truth is, I don't know what anything is or is for, and I don't know what any of my brothers and sisters need. And as Way of Mastery would suggest to us, we will create a better experience of life if we go into each moment in that space of divine ignorance, recognizing how little we actually know. And recognizing that whatever it is we think we know, since we don't know everything, whatever it is we think we know is at best only partially true and perhaps even completely false. And when I go into a life situation with that observation present, I am much more likely to like the experience of life I create. When I go in willing to learn, willing to be taught by life, just like Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about in this Tiep Hien form of interbeing Buddhism. So, unless there's another comment or a question or somebody calls in directly, I will move on and read the fifth mindfulness training. The fifth mindfulness training says, aware that true happiness is rooted in peace, rooted in solidity, rooted in freedom and compassion, and that true happiness is not rooted in wealth or fame. We are determined not to take as the aim of our lifetime pursuing fame, profit, wealth, or sensual pleasure, nor to accumulate wealth while millions are hungry and dying. We are committed to living simply and sharing our time, energy, and material resources with those in need. We will practice mindful consuming, not using alcohol, drugs, or any other products that bring toxins into our world and the collective body consciousness. The 8 Realizations of Great Beings Sutra says, quote, the human mind is always searching for possessions and never feels fulfilled. Bodhisattvas move in the opposite direction and follow the principle of self-sufficiency. They live a simple life in order to practice the way and consider the realization of perfect understanding as their only career. Close quotes. In the context of our modern society, simple living also means to remain as free as possible from the destructive social and economic machine, and to avoid stress, depression, high blood pressure, and other modern diseases. we should make every effort to avoid the pressures and anxieties that fill most modern lives. The only way out is to consume less. Once we are able to live simply and happily, we are better able to help others. That is the fifth mindfulness training. So again, in line with the first one, they're not going to accumulate dogmas or beliefs or ideologies, and they're not going to accumulate wealth just for the purpose of hoarding wealth, and possessions just for the purpose of hoarding possessions. When they have wealth, they will spread it around to help alleviate suffering in others. This is the Tiep Hien form of Buddhism that, the way I read it, Thich Nhat Hanh is inviting us into this level of awareness or practice, level of questioning, level of understanding and then questioning and then understanding and questioning, this cycle of growth in knowledge that comes from the direct interaction with life rather than from the recitation of memorized material or from the accumulation of goods and wealth. So we have some time. We've got about 5 minutes for a comment or a question. How's this landing for you? Again, one of the more poignant things that I read goes against what a lot of people understand. A lot of people have been exposed to Buddhism as a religion, and they've found some form of Buddhism that has all kinds of beliefs and practices, and that goes directly against what I've been reading here as offered by Thich Nhat Hanh in this particular form of Buddhism, where they reject the dogmas and the beliefs and the ideologies, and they understand that there is nothing in any of this teaching that you should fight or die or kill for, because it's just thought. It's old dead thought. It is not the living of life in the moment. It's not being in the awake and aware in the present moment. If you're focused on a set of beliefs or thoughts, it's from the past. So again, just to dip back into the way of mastery, the way it encourages us on a regular basis to do exercises like pick up something wherever you are. Take 5 or 10 minutes throughout your day. Pick up an object, whether it's a book off your desk or a flashlight or your phone, and just understand, question how little you know about it. You don't know how the material came to be. If it's a book and it's actually a paper book, you don't know what kind of trees were cut down to form the paper that this is printed on. You don't know where it was printed and what kind of ink. You don't know the people involved in that process. You're in a powerfully ignorant space. And it's only in my acknowledgement of my ignorance that I open up the possibility of learning. If I believe that I know what I know how I learned it, where I learned it, and why it's true, there's no possibility for learning in that moment when I hold that belief. So again, we extend the invitation from the way of mastery to engage these exercises. The exercise that says, I don't know what anything is or is for. I don't know what any of my brothers and sisters need in this moment. I don't know how to make something be different than it is, so I can ask what is to teach me about itself. As Guy Finley says, the Creator put us in a world where if we simply focus our attention on a thing or a situation, it will teach us about itself. If I focus my attention on that situation in a questioning way, then I'm open to learning from the interaction. If I focus my attention on something while I'm holding on to the belief or the dogma that says, I'm right, this situation is wrong, it's settled, why argue? Then there's no learning even potentially possible in that moment. So I thank you all for calling and listening and commenting. And I will close this off today. We're back the rest of the week. God willing, and the creek don't rise. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. And I invite you to um, turn the app back on and welcome Michael and Jeanie when they start up their second hour in just a few minutes. Blessings.